Hi, this is Joan.
Hello. Oh,
Everybody here?
everybody's here.
I'm getting used to all this technology myself, so it took us a few minutes to figure it all out. Um, all right, so I'm looking right now at you're wearing a blue t-shirt. Who am I looking at? Yes, who?
Nico.
You're Nico. All
Yeah.
right. And Jen, are you?
Hello.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
All right. Hi, it's Joan. And do we have Mary Lou with us?
That's me.
Oh, hi. Hey, Mary Lou. How are you?
Joan, fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm terrific, thank you.
Good.
All right. So I'm really excited because this is the beginning of our video chats on our new channel, Alive, which is going to be a destination for everyone going through what we're all going through, and also survivors in our circles of support, and hopefully eventually young women who want to make sure that they do everything they can to keep themselves healthy and do everything they can to prevent breast cancer. But sometimes it's really kind of in the stars in a way, so you really have to be more diligent. And Mary Lou, this is where I'm going to bring you in because you had quite an extensive family history. You want to tell us about that?
Very. My mother had breast cancer, my older sister, then I had it, and my younger sister. And I'm the only living survivor.
Oh my gosh! And as I remember reading your story, your mom had it in the 60s, and back in the 60s, they did what was called a radical mastectomy,
Right.
right?
Correct.
Do you recall back then? I mean, they back in those days they took the breast and they took the nodes and they took the muscles and I mean they really took a lot, right?
Right. Everything from the armpit down to the waist. And my mother made my sisters and I look at her surgery to see what was done. And she did it from a point of knowledge, and kind of warning because she felt that it probably ran in families. And, nobody knew too much about it back then. But she honestly looked like a plucked chicken. It was just frightening to look at.
Boy, it's unbelievable how far it's come since then. But back then there was a sensibility. I mean, chemo really wasn't around like it is today, or even radiation, so to speak, in its form as we have it today. And it was just thought back then that the more you cut out, the more you have a chance of keeping people alive, right?
That was the thinking, yes.
Now, was there an understanding back then that it ran in families, that because she had it, that all of you girls had to worry about it?
No, I think it was more her feeling. There wasn't a general understanding. Her mother had been a nurse and was very proactive. She was a nurse before antibiotics. So health really ran in the family, or health knowledge, information, and proper health care ran in our family. And that was something that she passed down to us.
Thank
Um,
goodness.
and right, absolutely. And she wanted us three, she knew she was not going to have long left in this world. She wanted us three girls to be aware of this and to be very proactive and to check ourselves. That was a big concern of hers.
So did you start that at a young age?
Yes, in my 20s.
How old was your
Started
old?
that, and I assumed that my sisters did too, and I found out later they started a little bit later than I did.
And your older sister got it first, right? How old was she?
She was 38 when she was diagnosed.
Wow, that's young. So that was before she would have been getting a mammogram, probably.
She had had about 3 mammograms.
So like baseline, because it used to be they started us with baselines at about age 35, and now there's some hesitancy about that because they say maybe, I guess, we're a little too young to be getting that kind of a dose. Now it's kind of leaning towards starting them at 40, but I just hear from so many women that are 35, 36, 37, and if they don't catch it themselves, like in a self-breast exam, then it's caught in late stage. What stage was it in when your sister was caught?
Joan, that was before they talked about stages.
Wow.
But hers was very advanced. She had a lump the size of a golf ball.
Yeah. All right. And then your younger sister also, that was a while ago.
Right, that was, I'm
12.
12 years out, and my sister would have been 10 years out. And she was fine for about 9 years, and it came back last year, and she just passed this in February.
Does that make you have more fear of recurrence?
It makes me realize that each day is a gift. And just because I'm 12 years out does not mean that I'm free and clear.
I mean, because I just finished and I keep having people say to me on social media, like, how are you dealing with the fear of recurrence? I wanted to say thanks a lot for putting that in my head, but I have to admit it's there.
Absolutely. And at most of the time, I don't have that fear, but I see my oncologist twice a year, and I have a mammogram ultrasound at one checkup, and at another 6-month period, I have a breast MRI. And the night or two before each of those visits, I get anxious.
Yeah, I'll bet. I'm just coming up on my first one. In about a week or so, I get my first mammogram checkup and ultrasound, and then just as you, I'll do the MRI in 6 months later. Mary Lou, how about you? How far? Um, uh, excuse me, Jen. How about you? You're 45. You actually teach. I'm told a lot of your students in Pilates have have been breast cancer patients.
That's correct, yes. Um, I chose to only do private sessions. And my mother was the only person in my family who ever was diagnosed with cancer, but she had lung cancer and had never smoked in her life. So it was more or less a fluke, I guess. Um, but when she was diagnosed, she was already in stage 4, and I felt like she had not been given any kind of hope, and I didn't like that. So when I went this route, I did my thesis paper when I did my master's certification on Pilates and cancer. And I just wanted to be able to give back. And it was all about going through adjuvant therapies and how you feel during, just day to day, and how it can always be different. So I did attract a lot of cancer survivors, and mainly breast cancer, because they wanted to increase their ranges of motion and especially their upper body strength. And it was so important for them to keep their self-esteem and be able to do it so much for themselves. And then all of a sudden, the cancer ball dropped on my lap. And
How did that happen? Did you find
well,
it yourself, or
I actually did. I had been going religiously every year for mammograms. And I had 4 years of mammograms in my hand, and I was due for the 5th. Like you had said, I'm 45 years old. I, never miss anything. I'm absolutely religious with everything. I had just gone to the OBGYN. She had checked things out. Yet in February, I had found a lump. And that very day, I went to my primary just to see what she had thought. She thought maybe it was hormonal, but at the same time I said, I want to make sure that I get this scheduled immediately. Um, and I did. They did the mammo with the ultrasound, and they could not tell me exactly what it was. And they did say that perhaps it was suspicious, so they sent me for an MRI of the breast. And at that point, they realized that I did not only have one lump, but I had 3. And one was over 2 centimeters, and there was another one that was close to 2 centimeters. So at that point, they scheduled me for a biopsy, and I was having some pain then underneath my armpit, so they decided to also biopsy an enlarged lymph. And they tested 5 spots on each lump as well as 5 spots on the enlarged lymph, and all 20 test sites turned back to be positive for breast cancer. And it was just an absolute shock. I could not understand how this all happened when I was so diligent.
Let me ask you a question. Did you discover that you had dense breast tissue? Was there a reason why that it was never being seen on the mammogram?
This is what they had told me after I had cancer, but nobody told me this beforehand. Had I known this beforehand, I would have insisted on having an MRI or insisted on having something. They had said perhaps if I had had an MRI that these lumps would have been seen, but they wouldn't have sent me since there was no history in the family and because of my age. So there was no reason to expect that that was a possibility.
See, just so you know, there's a lot of us working on this one right now. I mean, when I went public with my story and talked about the fact that I'd always had my mammograms and that they never showed anything, but then that I heard that if you had dense breast tissue, it wouldn't show anything and you needed the ultrasound, I heard from thousands of women from all across the country just like you. And Nico, am I right that you kind of ran into the same situation?
Yeah, well, I was diagnosed at 39 years old. I'm 40 now. I just turned 40. And, no one mentioned to me anything about sonograms. They said you can get a mammogram or whatnot. And I actually found it as well myself, just, shaving my armpit in the shower, and I kept feeling something, and I went to my gynecologist. I said something to him, and he said, oh, it's probably just, a swollen gland or something. And I went to my primary, who also said, you're fine, don't worry about it. And, a couple of months later, I just said, you know what, I don't know, I just had a feeling, this gut instinct to just go, and I made my own sonogram and mammogram appointment, and I just called in my OBGYN, and I insisted, and I said, you know what, you write the prescription, and I'm going. And that's kind of how it happened. And I also, I have very dense breasts, so it's almost like looking through a fog, in a mammogram, so they can't see anything. And through sonogram was the way that they found it. Mammogram, I was clear. So if I just had a mammogram, I would have been walking out with, breast cancer and not knowing it.
Yep, same as me. What you're saying is that this is so important for so many women. You're saying know your body. Mm-hmm. Do those exams, know in your heart of hearts if there's a lump or a ridge or something that doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, don't let some doctor say, you're too young, it's probably nothing. Is that be a resounding message of yours?
My message is don't hesitate and be your own advocate, really. I mean, you really have to be your own advocate, because if I would have just listened to my doctors, as I said, I don't know, God forbid, I don't know where I'd be today. Now, luckily I'm now just finished last week with all my treatments, and I'm able to enjoy my children and live every day and enjoy it.
Wait a second, you just finished your treatments. You have that much hair back?
Yeah, I finished my chemotherapy in September 15th, and I just finished I took Herceptin for a full year. So yeah, no, my hair's going back, and it's thick, and it's great, and I'm getting a lot of compliments, and everyone's asking me, who cut your hair? And I said, Cornell.
That's a great answer.
Cut your hair, But I'm getting a lot of compliments.
Oh, you can tell I've got a lot of hair envy. This is my wig still. And what's funny is that I have people say, "Oh, I like your haircut," and I don't even know what to say.
Right. You don't know who to say it to and who not to say it to.
I just say thanks. But
exactly.
Tell me, once you went and got once I gave you your diagnosis, then what happened? Did it go smoothly?
No, I think, I got my diagnosis from my gyno. He ended up calling me, I think, a night late. Well, I got the biopsy, and then they called me to give me my diagnosis. And, he described it as, poorly differentiated HER2 positive breast cancer. Now, if you look on the internet, I was a goner. according to the internet. I thought I was, that's it, I'm done. And I feel like once you're told, you're kind of floundering and you don't know what to do. And, this is where I kind of went into survival mode, and I kind of just went with it and started calling doctors and making appointments, and went and saw the first doctor I could see to get, the right diagnosis and know what my prognosis was.
And what were you told that you had to do?
I was pretty much told that I needed a lumpectomy, which is what I did. And I was told that I would need chemotherapy because I was HER2/neu positive. Now, for certain HER2/neu positives, at a certain age, you don't necessarily get chemotherapy, but because I was so young, they gave me a chemotherapy. I went through Taxotere, carboplatin, Herceptin, and then a newer drug came through while I was on chemotherapy called Perjeta, and I might be pronouncing that wrong because I'm not a doctor, but that was something that they had given to end-stage HER2/neu positive patients, and that actually was passed through for earlier stage. So I am now kind of I kind of got a clinical trial in even more preventative medicine, which is great.
One thing I want to make sure to, Jen, I want to point out that you went to a doctor first, and you were told, if I got the story correctly, that you needed only a mastectomy on one side, and then you went to another doctor who said, no, you need both. And I want to make sure we point out the need to get a second opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And also, you need to feel comfortable with who you're working with, and feel so that you feel positive about your treatment in general. My first doctor told me that I only needed a single mastectomy, that the double mastectomy was cosmetic. And her use of the word cosmetic with my cancer just stuck in my mouth and my brain so ill. And she said that it was just because she did not feel like it was going to, the chances were not high enough to come back. And I could go back and I could still have my mammograms and I could do all this stuff every 6 months instead. And I said, you just told me that it was missed because of dense breasts. And I'm walking around with 5 years of them. And the anxiety levels, and I'm only 45, I hope to be living at least another 45 years. Don't tell me that the risks aren't high enough. I did not feel comfortable with that doctor, no matter how many other people love her. I wanted to go and get a second opinion. And when I did, that doctor said, are you kidding me? I don't see any other choice but getting a double mastectomy, and I want to take the lymph out immediately so that I can test the lymph, and we have that. We have the knowledge of what's going on in there, and we do this immediately. And I had a date as I was walking out, and when we did, thank goodness we did, because out of 27 lymph, 9 of them were positive. The other doctor had also told me that there was no rush for the surgery because she felt like that it was in there for a very long time and it had just been missed. So you can get a lot of varying degrees of information, and I think it's very, very important to get a second opinion, and it's very important for you personally to feel comfortable with your doctor, and just gel with their treatment.
You're just immersed with so much information when, as the three of you really know, when you first get that diagnosis, and that's kind of like phase 1, and that's just the hardest phase. But I got to tell you, for me, phase 2 was also hard, which is now telling other people that I had cancer. Mary Lou, let me start with you. Did you find that hard? And telling your kids and just all your family members.
I found it very difficult. In fact, I was going to keep it to myself. I own a small business in the community where I live. and I wasn't going to say anything to anybody. I'm in a small study sharing group, and I did share with that group because I really wanted people to pray for me while I was making my decisions and going through everything. So I told them, but I was going to keep it a secret. But then when I wasn't at work for a while, people began to ask where I was, and I explained to my staff that it was okay to tell them. I felt a responsibility, thinking that maybe somebody could learn from my experience and maybe be a little more proactive for themselves.
Yeah.
So that turned out to be a real blessing because people were very kind and very supportive.
Because back when your mom, 60 years ago,
Oh,
people would hide out. They wouldn't tell anyone. It was hush hush, right?
and the word was whispered.
Yeah.
She has cancer. So we've come a long way.
Come a long way, and it feels much better today to not have to hold that in and to be able to share it with friends and just for the circle of support, but then with everyone else in the hopes that it will motivate other women to get checked and inspire other women to hold on to hope, right?
Exactly.
And you've really done that. I mean, you've decided to go out and share. I think it's probably a little bit therapeutic for us too, isn't it?
I think so. And you meet such incredible people too through this journey that I'm sure I wouldn't have met otherwise. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and I use that in quotes.
Absolutely. Nico, how about you? Were you inclined to try to keep it a secret?
Well, truthfully, I kind of have a big mouth, but
But you also have children.
this was one thing I didn't really think about whether I was going to be private or public or what to do. I knew I had to be honest with my children, and I have at the time I had a 4 and a 7-year-old. No one told me how to tell them or what to say, which was, something that I'm now working with other people on how to, tell your children.
And what advice would you give?
I'm sorry?
And what advice would you give? Because a lot of women have a real hard time with this one.
Well, we sat my 4 and 7. Obviously, different ages react differently, and you tell different ages differently. But we sat them both down, and we said, Mom, my husband and I both, and we said, Mommy has something called cancer. We didn't want to use the word sick because we didn't want them to think whenever they're sick that they're, it's a serious thing. We said, Mommy has something called cancer in her breast. She's going to be taking medicine that's going to make her hair fall out, and my hair fall out, and you're going to think I look sick, but that medicine is actually going to help me to be better so that I can be here for you and be better. And my kids kind of, my 7-year-old kind of said, okay, great, let me go play my Wii U now. And my 4-year-old, didn't really understand, and I think the first time she saw me, without hair, really scared her, but I made her, I actually took her hand and I made her actually feel my head, and, took the wig and I put it on her and I said, you look good as a blonde, and kind of played with her a little bit on it. And then my son kind of outed me at school the next day after I told, yeah, he outed me. So, then all of a sudden, and we go to, he goes to a school where there's a lot of people, and basically I had become the, this mother and this cancer mother, and everybody kind of rallied around me, which was great. And I really, because of that, which I think was the best gift he ever gave me, I was able to help other women within the school who came to me privately and thanked me for telling my story to them, because they then got their own diagnosis or went and got checked.
It makes it so much easier when you hear someone else that's walked down the path, that told their children and their friends, and the world didn't end.
Right.
And because it kind of feels that way in the moment.
Right.
That it's just going to be so drastic. And quite honestly, I kind of found the kids are pretty resilient, and they hear, and they kind of just go on living their lives. They're more, I don't mean to say that they aren't concerned about us, but it's much more important as to whether it's raining, they can go outside for recess. Well,
also my son, one thing that we didn't realize at the time, and now I know to say, is it's not contagious. It's
Oh,
not your fault. And that was really two things that we didn't say. And the next day, my son had asked my husband, "Is it contagious?" And that was something that who would have thought?
who would have thought? That wasn't something that I thought of.
No.
None of the kids ever asked. I'm trying to remember back to when we sat them down. Maybe my husband did. I was catatonic, I think, at the moment. And I know that my husband, Jeff, did most of the talking. And their biggest concern was whether I was going to die or whether you could live through it. And I had a good prognosis because I had been diagnosed at stage 2. Jen, how about you? How did you feel was it tough to make that call and get those words out of your mouth, I have cancer?
I didn't know how I was going to handle it at first. I think at first I only wanted to tell people that were going to be positive. People that I knew were going to be a good strength of support throughout. And then once I felt like I was in a stronger place, I could then let everybody else know. And then words started leaking out. And then I felt like I was being outed. So I went on Facebook and I just made a public announcement because I didn't want to be outed that way. I was like, nobody's going to out me. And once I just kind of made that leap off the bridge that way, the support was incredible.
Okay.
And I feel like the support has been so helpful. And even when you get those numbers that are so scary, if you don't do the adjuvant therapy, you have 80% chance of it returning. But even if you go through all of this therapy over the next year, you still have 20 to 25% of it returning. I'm like, really?
That's so scary.
Very good. So then, you have a lot of still down days.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the sisterhood. I mean, obviously it's not a sorority or a sisterhood that you want to join, but wow, is it powerful and is it compassionate? And, as soon as I went public on, and the social media response was just incredible. And it was really healing, I have to say. I mean, there's a lot of healing power in that, which is why all of the breast cancer organizations around the country are so important to be up and active and not only making sure that they're making resources available to women going through it, but also just that support. I'd love to get, we're going to have to come to an end, so I want to get final words. Mary Lou, why don't you start us off? Final words of advice for women watching?
I would just recommend that every woman be checked regularly. And because you've had breast cancer doesn't mean that it won't come back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later. And be very proactive with your own health and yet take the time to enjoy every day because it is a gift.
And might I just say, we're so, so sorry for your loss of your sister. You have all of us who will keep her in our prayers.
Thank you, Joan.
I know you'll be vigilant, that's for sure. Nico, what are your final thoughts for all the ladies watching?
I got a lot of thoughts.
I don't want to get that email. I know men get breast cancer too.
Right. I would just say, obviously don't hesitate. Trust your gut. Be your own advocate. Push your doctors to get that sonogram along with that mammogram, no matter what. Even if you don't have dense breasts, get that sonogram because it doesn't hurt. There's nothing a negative of getting a sonogram.
Yeah.
It's not an X-ray. It's not hurting you. And I would just say, your cancer not only affects you, but it affects the people around you. So make sure to, realize that you have family too that is going through it just as much as you're going through it.
It's interesting. For years we've been told always, everybody, know your numbers. And that's like what, your heart rate, your cholesterol level, your blood pressure. Well, in the last year I've learned that one of those numbers is our breast density. And yet I saw a survey recently that said 95% of all women don't know their breast density. So when you get a mammogram, they do check. That report is there for you. And every woman should find out what her breast density is. And the higher it is, the less likely a mammogram is ever going to find your cancer. So once again, we're going back to that be your own best advocate and push it. Don't let some doctor tell you, it's probably nothing. When your gut instinct tells you, you were right, Nico, your gut instinct told you to keep looking, and thank goodness. Jen, you want to give us a final word?
Just know your body. No test is 100%. No doctor is 100%. Believe what your body is telling you. And if you're going through this, yes, there's up days, there's down days. Thank God for the sisterhood, and just thank God for the support and everyone around you. And I'm just very grateful.
Well, thank you all for being part of the Alive Sisterhood. I know I learned today, and I hope that you all stay well and live many, 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 many years.
You too as well, Joan. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
All right.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
You guys were awesome.
Thanks.
Really, really awesome. This is our very, very first one. So, and we're going to have it up on when the site goes live tomorrow, the new internet channel. We launch tomorrow. Excuse me? At Live with Joan. Alive with Joan. .com. We'll make the announcement tomorrow morning on the Today Show, and then with Hoda and Kathy and everywhere else that they'll let us say it.
It's great that you're doing this, truthfully.
Well, I mean, to me, if we just have one place, and I've already been out interviewing expert after expert, and we're going to go to every medical institution, find out what they're all doing, find out. I have learned so much in the last few weeks of just interviewing experts that I can't even believe it. But the other part of this is that it's going to be interactive like this, and we know how important it is to get the right treatment and all of that, but one thing I've learned that I didn't know over this past year is how important the support system is and the sisterhood, and just being able to keep up your spirits and to hold on to hope and believe that you did everything that modern medical treatment was available to you.
Yeah, well, you have to trust your doctor as well, and I actually have my oncologist on speed dial. Literally, we text back and forth, and she's become like a very close friend of mine. So, I trust her, and it's great. It's a great, now she's part of my family.
There are studies that show that the better relationship you have with your doctors, and the more all your doctors talk together, the better your outcome is. So yes. That's good news. All right, I've got to jump off. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Great meeting you. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.